along with us as we explore another trail somewhere west of Wall Street. Today we're in Medora, North Dakota, at the North Dakota Cowboy Hall of Fame. We're going to be talking about some Texas cattlemen who brought longhorns all the way up to this grass, and a cowboy who stayed with them and is enshrined in this beautiful, beautiful museum. We'll be right back. Somewhere West of Wall Street is brought to you by our friends at the National Ranching Heritage Center, located on the campus of Texas Tech University in Lubbock, Texas, by Railhead Realty for homes and ranches in North Texas, by the Texas Department of Agriculture and their Go Texan program, by the American Quarter Horse Association, registering America's favorite horse for over 75 years, by American Hats, proud to be an American and proud to wear an American hat, by Jerry's Auto Group, located in Weatherford, Texas, for over 50 years, by the Caesar Clayburgh Wildlife Research Institute, conserving wild things and wild places, and by the King Ranch Saddle Shop with retail stores in Fort Worth, Kingsville, Houston, and College Station, or visit us at krsaddleshop.com. The National Ranching Heritage Center on the campus of Texas Tech University tells the story of ranching in the American West. Those stories began in countless cabins and dugouts and evolved to cattle-bearing mansions like the Barton House. Originally built as a centerpiece of a ranching and farming community in West Texas, it now stands as a tribute to another era at the National Ranching Heritage Center. As a viewer of my show, I know you believe in preserving our wonderful ranching heritage, and I would like to personally invite you to come to the one place in the world where you can walk through the history of ranching from the Spanish land grants to modern times. You can also help preserve our history by joining me as a member of the Ranching Heritage Association by visiting ranchingheritage.org. Come experience real ranching, real stories, real heritage at the National Ranching Heritage Center in Lubbock, Texas.
Hi, folks. Medicare open enrollment is simple. 1, call the number on your screen. 2, the agent will look up your zip code to see if you're able to eliminate copays and get Part C benefits like prescriptions and expanded coverage for your dental work at no extra cost. 3, they'll check if you're eligible to get money added to your Social Security check up to $1,700 a year. Call to check your zip code.
I called to check my zip code.
I called to eliminate copays.
I called to get everything I deserve.
I called to get money added to my Social Security check.
Millions of people have trusted the Medicare coverage helpline. You can too. Call the 800 number on your screen to check your zip code. Don't miss the deadline. Call now. It's free.
Call 1-800-799-4188. That's 1-800-799-4188 now.
I know things.
Is under the couch.
Driver or three-wood?
Three-wood.
We want to retire early and need a health plan.
My parents' plan won't cover me anymore. Where can I get a health plan?
At Health Markets, they search many of the nation's most recognized carriers so they can help you find the right plan at the right price that's the right fit for you.
How long does it take?
Health Markets can help you find a plan in minutes.
I'm between jobs.
No matter where you are in life, Health Markets can help you find your right fit and help you get what you qualify for.
How much does it cost?
Health Market service is free, and it's helped Americans get enrolled in over 5 million policies. It's under the couch. It's always under the couch. And you can always count on Health Markets to find a health plan fit for you.
Don't wait. Save time. Find the plan that fits you. Call 800-349-6133 now or visit healthmarkets.com.
Health Markets. We are the Duttons. Merry Christmas.
Arthur Nathaniel Jefferies was a well-known cattleman here in North Dakota, but Arthur wasn't born here. He was born in 1852 in New York. As a child, he moved with his parents to Wisconsin, and then when he was 12 years old, the family moved to Saxton, Missouri. In 1873, when Arthur was 21, he left home and went to Texas to be a cowboy. Arthur went to work for the Reynolds family in Stevens County, Texas, which at that time was very much in the middle of the Indian Territory and the Indian Wars. But the Reynolds were cattlemen, and they did what it took to establish a ranch, including fighting Indians. And about 11 years later, Arthur had become a good enough cowboy that his employers, brothers George and William Reynolds, put him in charge of a trail herd bound for Dakota Territory. In 1884, Arthur and maybe 15 cowboys trailed about 4,000 head of longhorns into what would become McKenzie County, North Dakota. They left Texas in early spring and reached Dakota Territory in September. And once the herd reached the high plains, landmarks were few and far between. So Arthur used a compass to keep his herd heading north. These were probably the first longhorns ever brought to North Dakota. In 1885, the Reynolds bought land there in McKenzie County from Hall and Braden, who had intended to operate a sheep ranch just north of the Little Missouri River on Indian Creek. The sheep deal didn't work, but it worked for cattle. And Arthur then established a permanent headquarters for the Reynolds. When things got lined out, they named him manager of the ranch, and they returned to Texas. The Reynolds brothers named their ranch for their official brand, the Long X, which is said to be one of the first 2 brands recorded in North Dakota. The Long X employed a large number of cowboys, especially for spring brandings and fall roundups, and the men on the roundups worked 7 days a week in all kinds of weather. Over the next several years, Arthur returned to Texas a few times to bring more herds to Dakota Territory. Eventually, he had trailed about 10,000 head to the Long X. But then there was the winter of 1886 and 1887, which started out with the first blizzard in November of 1886. That winter was talked about as long as the cowboys who experienced it lived. In the north country of Montana, Wyoming, and the Dakotas, blue northers whistled across the plains, bringing one blizzard after another. The Reynolds brothers had about 11,000 head of cattle grazing in the fall, but by spring, only 7,000 remained alive. Arthur, as foreman of the Reynolds Dakota Territory Ranch, allowed the Indians on the Fort Peck and Fort Berthold reservations to drag the dead cattle to their homes to feed their people. The Reynolds never fully recovered in North Dakota, and in 1897, they sold the entire McKenzie County outfit to the Converse Cattle Company, and much of the land is now part of the North Unit of Theodore Roosevelt National Park. But Arthur stayed in North Dakota, and along with some partners, formed the Dakota Land and Cattle Company. He became a very successful cattleman and helped start the North Dakota Stockmen's Association. And he was also one of the founders of Dickinson, North Dakota. Arthur died in 1909. His obituary states that Arthur was simple and unassuming in his manners, a kind and good neighbor, an honest citizen, and a good friend. It further states that in losing him, the community has suffered an irreparable loss. As for the Long X, U.S. Highway 85 bridge over the Little Missouri River south of Watford City is named for it, and there is a Long X Visitor Center and Museum in Watford City that features exhibits about the historic ranch. Arthur Jefferies has been recognized for his contributions to the cattle industry in North Dakota, and was inducted into the North Dakota Cowboy Hall of Fame here in Medora. When we come back, we're going to dig into a little more history of the Reynolds and see what else they did together with A.N. Jefferies. Stay with us. In 1847, Barbara Watkins Reynolds moved from Alabama to Shelby County in East Texas. In 1859, after 12 years of farming, he moved further west, first to Palo Pinto, Texas, and then to Stevens County, where the family settled along the Clear Fork of the Brazos River just north of what became Albany, Texas. While they were living at Palo Pinto, Reynolds' oldest son, George, who would eventually take over his father's ranching business, carried the mail horseback from Palo Pinto to Weatherford, a distance of 35 miles. That was quite an undertaking for a 15-year-old boy, all alone, at a time when Indians were raiding throughout the area. In 1862, at age 17, George joined the Confederate Army, serving in the 19th Texas Cavalry for 18 months before receiving a medical discharge and coming home to convalesce. But his fighting days weren't over. During the war, with most of the soldiers having been called back east to fight for one side or the other, settlers on the frontier could no longer depend on the army for protection against the Indians. Many families abandoned their homes and went back to civilization. The Reynolds, however, stayed. And during the next 5 or 6 years, they and the other ranchers in the area who elected to stay ran their ranches and tried to protect their families and their livestock. In doing so, they would often pursue Indians following the raid in which horses were stolen. In April 1867, George and his brother William joined a posse to pursue a band of Indians who had stolen the neighbors' horses. And during the battle, George was shot in the stomach by an arrow. He managed to pull the arrow out, but the arrowhead came off and remained in his body for the next 15 years until he had it removed by surgery in Kansas City. In 1867, the Reynolds welcomed the return of the U.S. Army. 4 companies of the 6th Cavalry established Fort Griffin on a high bluff overlooking the Clear Fork. The presence of soldiers in the area helped stem the Indian attacks, and the fort, along with the town of the same name that sprang up near the river below the fort, offered an opportunity for social gathering among the ranchers. It also provided a much closer place to buy supplies. And prior to the fort being established, Weatherford had been the nearest supply point, and it was almost 100 miles away. The presence of the soldiers also enabled the Reynolds to continue their cattle business. In 1868, brothers George and William formed a partnership, adopted the Long X brand, and decided to move west. They gathered an outfit of men, wagons, oxen, horses, and all their cattle and headed out. The first year they wintered in Roswell, New Mexico. Then they went on to Colorado and then California, where their herd was sold at an extremely good profit. In 1871, they moved their herd of longhorn cattle to Bent County, Colorado, where they established their Point of Rocks ranch. But in 1875, drought and the defeat of the hostile Indian tribes in Texas prompted the Reynolds brothers to move their base of operations back to their ranch in Stevens County, Texas. Their ventures prospered over the next few years through cattle drives to Wyoming, Utah, Nevada, Montana, Nebraska, and the Dakotas, as we talked about a while ago. And they even drove cattle to Canada, all of which enabled them to establish ranches in nearby Haskell, Shackelford, and Throckmorton counties. By 1884, their partnership had been incorporated as the Reynolds Cattle Company. In 1895, the Reynolds Company acquired 230,000 acres in Jeff Davis County, way out in West Texas, and established its Kent Ranch. At one time or another, the corporation owned extensive ranch lands in 9 Texas counties, as well as in New Mexico, Arizona, Montana, and of course, North Dakota. One of the last large properties acquired in the 1920s was the purchase of the former Rita Blanca division of the XIT Ranch, plus some adjacent lands in Hartley County, near Dalhart in the Texas Panhandle. All of this totaled 64,000 acres. George Reynolds died at the age of 81 on March 5, 1925 in Fort Worth and was buried in Albany. George's brother William died in 1929, also in Fort Worth. He was 82. At the time of the brothers' deaths, the Reynolds Cattle Company had approximately 330,000 acres of ranch land in the Davis Mountains of Texas, 70,000 acres in Throckmorton, Haskell, and Shackelford counties, and 64,000 acres in the Texas Panhandle. Reynolds' descendants have made much of that property today, and part of them still operate under the Long X brand. In just a moment, we'll return with Miss Mona Kramer. She's the great-granddaughter of A.N. Jefferies. Don't go anywhere. We're coming right back.
Years ago, I was a single mom and I was living paycheck to paycheck. That's when I downloaded the free Personal Capital app. Now
proud to introduce you folks to Mona Kramer. She's the great-granddaughter of A.N. Jefferies. And Mona, do you remember anything about the family ranch?
I don't remember anything about the family ranch other than the tradition of the Long X. They had the Long X brand just because it was could be a one iron brand, and they could just brand the cattle, and with that many cattle it would take less time.
A.N. Jefferies made quite an impression and left some pretty deep tracks in North Dakota, didn't he?
He sure did. He made 4 cattle drives from Texas to North Dakota, and the largest one was 10,000 head. The 10,000 head that they traveled with, they would break camp at daybreak, and the lead cattle would leave at daybreak, and then they would stop about 1 o'clock in the afternoon to where they were going to hold over at night. And it would take until 6 o'clock that evening for the remainder of the 10,000 to catch up. And then they would gather the cattle in a circle, and they had 2 outriders, and one would go one direction and one would go the other direction, and they never passed each other in the night.
My goodness, that is a lot of cattle.
That's a lot of
That's a
cattle.
big circle to make.
Isn't that amazing?
Yes. What other stories do you remember hearing your family talk about?
Well, Jay Grantier worked for the Long X Ranch for the Reynolds brothers and for my great-grandfather. And when he went down to Texas on another drive, he wired and told Jay to get about 150 horses and head south with them because they would need remounts. And to just go south, and he would meet up with the herd. And so, you know, there's no telephones, there's no anything like that. So he kept going with his men and the 150 head of horses, and he never met him until they got to the Texas border. And they had been held up at the border because of tick fever, so they couldn't leave Texas.
Right.
So,
You know, we have a tendency to try to identify things that happened long ago with the way we live today, and it's just impossible.
it is impossible.
Because we can't imagine not having cell phones to call ahead and let them know where we are.
That's right. It's so important to keep our heritage alive.
You bet it
and
is.
that history, to keep it for future generations so that they realize what our past generations have been through, that the road hasn't always been easy.
Because still, even in the livestock business today, every day's a gamble.
Every day.
So,
I know that,
I
yes.
want to thank you so much.
Thank you so much,
Such a
Red.
pleasure for you being
Yes,
here.
I appreciate it.
And we're going to talk to Rex Cook here in a little
Yes.
bit and talk to Rex about the cattle business today and
Oh,
what
that'd
he
be great.
remembers about it
That'd be great.
in the great North Dakota country. It's my pleasure to introduce you folks to Rex Cook. Rex knows a lot about the cattle business in North Dakota. And have you been in this country all your life?
Yes, sir. I was raised at Sentinel Butte, North Dakota. Except for a couple of years with Uncle Sam, I was here all the time.
Are you in the cattle business?
Not anymore. I did a lot of things. When I grew up, I was going to be a cowboy. That's what I wanted to be. And our family had large herds of horses. My uncle had a big horse ranch. And so I wanted to be a cowboy. When I went to school, my mother encouraged me to go to college. 45, I graduated high school. And a rancher from out where I'd worked came in and wanted me to teach their school because they couldn't get a school teacher. So I taught school for 1 year.
You said your family was in the horse business.
Yes, sir.
And what did you do with it? Was it a remount?
No. My grandfather was born in Ohio, and then he kept going west. And he was in the construction business with dirt. And he always had horses. He had a sister up by McCluskey, North Dakota. So she drove up there, took the kids and went there, and he brought the horses up. And then they ranched there for a number of years. And he was quite a, I suppose, entrepreneur, you can call him, but he started a stage line up there, at Bowden, North Dakota, built the first hotel and livery stable. And then the kids had grown up in no school, So my grandmother said, we've got to go back to Iowa and go to school. And my uncle was a young man, about 20 years old, and he didn't want to go back. He was a cowboy. So he took the horse herd and came out to the Badlands in 1901. And he had thousands of horses. He established a big horse ranch.
Do you know a lot about the Jefferies and the Reynolds when they came up?
I know a little about them, not what historians know.
Mm-hmm.
And it was quite a deal. This A.N. Jefferies, quite a man. After he left the cattle business, he lived in Dickinson, operated a bank, and did all this. And he died at a young age too. So he did a lot in his life.
Were there any interesting stories about bringing the cattle up the first time that you know about?
What I heard about was that he brought them up and he was headed for northeastern Montana, up around Malta and in there. And he got to Webo, and I know some hunters and trappers were there, and they said, why don't you go east? There are no buffalo in there, and there's a lot of grass. And so he changed his plans and took his herd into North Dakota and on McKenzie County on the Long Axe.
Well, Rex, thank you so much for taking the time to spend with us and visit with us. Yeah. And I really enjoyed it.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Hope we'll see you again.
And keep up the good work. You're doing a great
We're
thing.
going to work on it.
I don't see how you get it all done. Okay, well, thanks a lot.
Thank you. You folks stay with us. We'll be right back. Hi, friends. I've been a member of the American... As you folks know by now, this is my favorite part of our show, where we pause to give thanks to the one who made all of this possible. Our song of inspiration is brought to you by our friends at the American Quarter Horse Association, registering America's favorite horse for over 75 years. Why don't we join the boys on the porch of the bunkhouse, because they're all tuned up and just waiting on us. Say we got this one saucered and blowed. It's time for us to ride on out of here. We got lots of work to do. Thanks for riding along with us. We hope it taught you something about the West and the cattle drives and cattlemen that you didn't know or hadn't even thought about. Before we leave, I want to give you something to think about. Being on a horse is being closer to heaven. Getting bucked off is the same thing. Be sure you join us this week on your local radio station for Cowboy Corner, and join us right here next week as we explore another trail somewhere west of Wall Street. Adios, my friends.